Good evening. This is Quandra Gaines, and we're on Political Cipher with Q. Would like to thank all of my guests, Mr. Gaskins, Miss Ellis, Mr. O'Neill, and Mr. Branch, for joining me this week. We're going to talk about how legislation has a real effect on businesses. And we're going to talk about some other things, homelessness, maybe perhaps local government and some state government. So I would like each member of the panel to introduce yourself and we can proceed after that.
I can start. I'm Joe Gaskins. I'm the co-chair of the Maryland Business Clergy and also the president of the Prince George County Contractors and Business Association. And I have a consultant business that's been operating um, I've actually been in business since 1989. So I've been around for quite a bit.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'll go next. I'm Lisa Ellis. I'm owner of Ellis Industries, a small certified minority firm located in Charles County, but initially opened in Prince George's. The products and services that I provide are I conduct research and provide advice and advocacy on a wide range of issues, specifically social, political, and economic issues, in hopes of influencing policymakers and stakeholders to make change in our communities. I am a board member of the Maryland Business Clergy, as well as other advocacy groups within the state. But I will stick with right now, for the purpose of today's program, support and represent the Maryland Business Clergy.
My name is Earl O'Neill, and I'm a community activist, and I'm past president of South County Economic Development. I'm a board member of the Business Clergy Maryland Business Partnership. I'm also active in the high school, Friendly High School, which is concessions and stuff. I mean, my kids have graduated since '08, but I'm still active in there. I'm also a member of CPAC, which is Juvenile Conversion Program. But I'm also a volunteer in the community active, so I can talk the way I can talk. So when people talk stuff theoretically about stuff and they ain't in the community, I can say that's whatever stuff. You know what I mean? And what I'm saying is I'm active in all politics in my community because I feel that if you're not active and you're not supporting people who is putting an agenda together, you need to shut up. If you're not out there, you know what I mean? That's what I feel. And as you know, and I'm like I said, I'm out there. Go ahead.
All right. I'm Bruce Branch. I'm Executive Director of Maryland Business and Clergy Partnership. I'm President of Branch Communications. We write grants. We do help minority businesses get established. Two-time candidate. I'm like Mr. O'Neill. We work together on many issues. I am a community activist, a two-time candidate for Prince George's County Council. But more importantly, that I'm a person who's always had a heart for the disenfranchised and the least of these.
Where you at? I don't see you, man. What, you ain't got you can't see you or something? What's the deal?
It's showing it on. It says you're in the show. I don't know. They say everyone
we can see you, but we can't see you, bro.
I don't know why. Maybe I'll switch on computers here.
Okay. Did you turn your camera on?
Yeah, it said it was on.
No, we see just audio.
Hold on,
we got
all right, Mr. Haney.
Yeah, Mr. Haney.
Hey, good evening. Thank you very much for having me, Quandra, and hello to everyone. And definitely heard Mr. O'Neill, because I absolutely agree with you. You're not willing to put skin in the game, put work in, and you can't stay on the sidelines and punch holes in anything. And you know, I'm a hotelier by profession. Do a lot of work in tourism and tourism industry in the state, have my own business, do a lot of workforce development training, do a lot of philanthropic work with young people, particularly in the schools in Baltimore City. and in the community. And I'm originally from Baltimore, and it's just good to be here for this conversation.
Okay. Well, while Mr. Branch is looking to see what we can do, or see on our end if we can pull you up as well, we're going to talk about legislation and how it affects businesses. Does anyone want to start?
So by registration, what do you mean by?
Legislation. How legislation and
I'm sorry.
legislation affects businesses on the state level, on the federal level, and on the local level.
You want me to start first? I
However
certainly
you
will give you my opinion of it. I've been actively involved as an activist in the community, going back to William Donald Schaefer's term as governor of the state of Maryland. And I just want to say this before I go into that spill, is that we now have a time to put a candidate in that looks like us, that we can hold accountable. And since I've been working with him, I know the heart of the person, and his commitment to minority businesses is one of the best things about this particular individual. He's got a commitment to the business community, and it's up to us to rally around him to get him elected to this particular position. Now, let me move to the impact of government and elected leadership on minority business people, because that's what I am, and specifically African American businesses. And I would say this, that we have a challenge, a severe challenge. None of our governors, I've known all of them, I personally worked with all of them during the period of time, and none of them have responded in an effective manner to assure that the MBE businesses are taken care of. It's something that they put on the back burner. They grant waivers. They don't put department heads in place and hold them accountable for getting contract opportunities to minority businesses. I don't want to say specifically African Americans, because they are doing worse than any other MBE group in the state of Maryland. Now, and I want to remain relevant versus going back. So I'll deal with Hogan's administration versus going back to other administrations. And then I'll deal with also Wes Moore's promises on providing direction. During Hogan's administration, the focus was on Asian businesses. No doubt that he did help a few African Americans, but predominantly who benefited from the MBE program were Asian companies. And that's great. I've had my conversations with the secretary of the minority business affairs, and none of those Bruce, that's you.
That's you, Bruce. You don't even mess up all the sound and stuff.
Yeah, he's got it.
Bruce, cut your sound.
It looks like he's muted, but it's still static.
He's got two open.
Yeah, he's got two devices open.
Oh, that's what that is.
Okay, let me keep going. So and the way the governors must hold their department heads and
It looks like we lost Joe.
Hey,
will
Joe, there you go, Pat. He back, Joe.
Will determine the success of a administration. There has got to be a focused attention, and I'll go back. I was in D.C. during Marion Barry's administration, and during that time, the MBE programs in the city were more effective than they are now, which is absolutely ridiculous. We give grant waivers to on contracts to large prime contractors. We don't punish department heads for not meeting their goals and status. And it's not only in the governor's office, but it goes down to the treasurer, the comptroller, and the attorney general. All of those are new individuals who are going to be in the state of Maryland. Now, if we as African American people don't stand up now while we have leadership and hold our leadership accountable and work with our leadership to get it done, then the programs that we put in place basically will have been done for no financial gain to our community. I've seen small businesses go under. I don't see any effective long range companies who've been there, who've been successful with moving to the next level. They are in it and they're out of it. And it's a struggle just to keep in the game. And we have to have that improvement to take place, and it's got to stop with this governor. Because the other ones in the past, I would just want to wipe those out. It's been ineffective, and it's got to stop with the new leadership.
Okay. All right, Ms. Ellis.
Can I say this?
Yes.
Oh, okay, Lisa, go ahead.
I don't know what question she was asking. You just interrupted her when she said my name. I didn't say anything.
She wanted you to go ahead and talk about what your issue is, and not about
let her
home.
ask the question. We don't
She
know what
just
the
said
question
yes.
is.
But she said, "Go ahead, Lisa." She said, "Go ahead, Lisa."
Thank you. So I was going to ask Ms. Ellis if she had anything that she would like to add to what Mr. Gaskin said, or did you have a whole new viewpoint of what he presently said?
Well, Joe and I have worked together and presented testimony on several issues regarding minority inclusion and participation. My biggest pet peeve is the procurement and inclusion on major contracts, such as marijuana. The medical marijuana specifically was originally issued to 15 white organizations, and we had to beg, plead, and borrow to get in the game, to get skin in the game, and to get additional licenses added to when we were the most egregiously affected in the state and throughout the country. And in lieu of that, now we're looking at recreational being introduced when we have not resolved the issue of adequately adding additional licenses for minority Black firms, not just minority firms, but Black Maryland firms are not at the table equitably as they should be. And this is a history. Gaming was the same thing with the video lottery. When we're looking at Jobs First programs and the video lottery, as well as the gaming sites, and how from construction to ownership, we're not at the table and at equal, we don't have an equal stake at the table. So we need legislators like the Governor Westmore and the new administration that's going to take place to level that playing field. And if we're going to level the playing field, we need to look at policy that affect housing, procurement, and homelessness, and many other social ills that are pushing us and keeping that wealth gap in our communities. So I'm looking forward to working with this administration to help close those wealth gaps and to mediate how we get to the table, how we're at the table, and the representations that we have.
Okay, Mr. Branch.
My perspective is a little different. Minority businesses, of course, the bane of any thriving economy. But I think a residual impact is the violence that we see on the streets, particularly in Prince George's County and in Baltimore City. And I say that because where there's a loss of hope and a loss of opportunity, many of these businesses would be able to hire, for instance, in Baltimore, the squeegee boys. Many of these businesses will be able to place, as Joe has the Prince George's Contractors Association, a lot of these young men, give them technical training so that they can get an employable wage. So the lack of minority participation impacts the African American community in many other ways. And now we see the societal ills of the lack and the deprivation.
Good point. All right, Mr. Haney.
Hey, again, first of all, it's good to be here, and I'm listening to Mr. Branch talk about the squeegee kids, and they're right where they want to be. Because I don't know if you've been out there on the corner and talked with them. I've been out there on the corner and talked with them. Many of them have jobs, but what they don't have is disposable cash, which is what they want, and a social environment to hang with their boys. You know what I'm saying? So they want cash every day because the $250 check that they may get every 2 weeks is not enough to sustain them for some of their needs. Okay, so that may be an issue. But I think we're in a very good time. I've testified in Annapolis over 30 times in the past, probably 7 years, for legislation more favoring the tourism environment and small businesses. And you know, we're in a good space here. We got Adrian Jones. We should be in a good space. We got Adrian Jones, House Speaker, potentially Mr. Moore, Governor, Brooke Learman, Controller, Derek Davis, Treasurer, who will sit on the Board of Public Works. First time in ever the history of probably the world, there's not a white man anywhere around deciding contracts. Okay, so the value of our strategies, and as it was said, working with our public officials to ensure that black businesses, because it's not about small minority, it's about black businesses. You know, it's about black people getting a fair share. SBAM or MBA, whatever you call it, is irrelevant to what the issues are in our community. But we have got to take some ownership as well. You know what I'm saying? We've got to take some accountability for the issues in our homes with our children and understand that it isn't necessarily on the politicians to deal with that. It's on us grandparents and us parents to ensure that our home is in order, our kids are going to school, et cetera, and let the politicians, because as someone said earlier, us holding them accountable, do what it is that we need them to do, ensuring that we get the resources that we need. So I think we've got to make sure that we're measured and we compartmentalize who's responsible for what in terms of what's happening. I'm not going to ask the police and the mayor if my child's out there running reckless, selling dope, to deal with my child when I'm not. Why would they deal with it and I don't want to deal with it? I don't understand that.
What happened?
Are you finished, Mr. Haney?
No, but I am.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill.
Hey. See, I see my thing is this, like Joe said, I'm a product of DC. I went to Frostburg State. My senior year, I interned for John Wilson, the Wilson Building, you know, when Marion was at large. Let me bring it up to date. Lisa, Joe, Bruce. My thing is, once if we get West to do everything we want him to do and send the money to Baltimore City in Prince George's County, we got to make sure the user-friendly Negroes who's running those places make sure that minority business get the money. We, the four of us, fought MGM, where MGM basically told a lot of minority business who was dump truck drivers, where they was getting 125 a load, and they put it always down to 65 a load. To and then when the black, and they can correct me if I'm right, that said, well, they can't do it, so they got a company out of Virginia who hire Hispanics to do the 65. We had black politicians. See, I ain't going to the state. We had Negroes said best effort, and made, if they didn't go by the issues, they didn't hold by the rules that were set, they made the fine so low that me and you could pay it. You know what I mean? MGM in just in this setting right here made $70 million in April only when Negroes started making money out of that, it was when they put the carpet in there. That was a 2-point-some billion-dollar business. So when the boy got electrocuted just touching the handle, everybody was upset. Well, what the deal was, black politicians, I ain't talking about Hogan, O'Malley, it gave MGM a green light on whatever they want. We got to make sure the whole Negro politicians, once they get the money from West back to the counties, Baltimore City or whatever, that they hold them accountable, are using the money to make sure that we are uplifting our community, whether it's in education, contracts, or whatever. Just like the school system. I told Wes, and Joe know this, I told Wes, I said, Wes, you can get in there and be governor, but you give them $1 billion and it comes back down to the county or the city, who's going to make sure that they're accountable for that money? You know what I mean? They just this last week, the woman, we got 900 teachers short in Prince George's County. They told some of them administrators to go to the classrooms who's making 120, 130. They looked at her like she was crazy. See, we gotta, we can't blame white folks for all our problems. We got Negroes, user-friendly Negroes, who just want to make sure it's going right. There's Negroes in key positions. It's just like I told Joe know this. I told Mel Franklin years ago, I say, MGM was supposed to be like our Atlanta airport when Maynard Jackson was mayor of Atlanta. Negroes supposed to be millionaires and have contracts. He said, well, that ain't the same thing. And they're trying to do it again with developers. Negroes is controlling shit. Excuse me.
No, go ahead. This is the show.
And what I'm saying is we can't just keep on. I mean, I think Wes going to be all right, but we got to make sure Wes scolds some of his supporters to make sure that they're accountable once he gives them the money, whether it's the mayor of Baltimore, the county exec, or the people around him, to make sure that they are doing stuff as it relates to helping black businesses and black folks. That's what my thing is. You know what I mean? We, like I say, I got a saying, whether it's schools, education, some stuff we can't blame on white folks. You know what I mean? We got to take it. That shit. We in positions to make the critical position to make sure stuff is running right. You know what I mean? That's my thing.
Can I ask Mr. O'Neill a question?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mr. O'Neill, and I lived in D.C. as well. I lived in Trinidad. I knew Marion Barry. I ran a hotel up in Georgetown, and Marion Barry bucked the odds because he, regardless of, I call them stakeholders, I call them, all these politicians, be it Brandon Scott or that Bowser over there in D.C. now that, along with Fenty and Williams, allowed D.C. to be turned over and sold. Right, to the white folks.
Right.
Okay. All of them have these special interests because that's where their money comes. And as we understand how to fund our politicians, and Wes has a lot of special interest money. Joe knows how the game is run. So Brandon Scott over here, is it really his office? Or is it the office of those that put him in office? And as much as he wants to do for us and give us, he can't because, as the world turns, we don't really own the real estate. We don't really own the financial institutions. Marion Barry didn't give a darn, and he took care of a lot of black people. But then D.C. was 80% black when he was mayor as well. So you had to go through him to get to anything. And D.C. is run differently in terms of how its politics goes than a Baltimore City does. But like you said, the school act here, where we had a 21st century plan in Baltimore, the Baltimore City school budget, the Baltimore City budget are political slush funds, money that are given out for favors of those that have supported those candidates, black people. You call them Negroes, I call them black people, right? Because we still have to own them regardless of what they do and where they are. They had to pay that back. And we're just hoping that we have put West in a position. That's why it's important that we have PACs and we donate to political candidates, be it Stacey Abrams in Atlanta or Val Demings in Florida. We have to support our own candidates, man, so that we're putting them in office with money that looks black, and they don't have to go to these special interests, man. And that's what we don't realize a lot.
And
I
you're
think we
right. You're
realize
right,
it, but
Michael. You're right, Michael.
I'm sorry,
And
let me hear from Lisa. Look, what were you going to say, Lisa?
that's one of the reasons that I push procurement and ownership. If we're not inclusive and fighting to get into these multi-billion-dollar industries, we cannot finance and support our own. And when I say our own, I'm not just talking about people that look like us, but individuals that actually will carry out an agenda that's for the people, by the people, and not sidestep the process. That has been our fight to make sure that legislation and the individuals that we elect will deliver on those promises to help us to get there. We can't support
Amen.
ourselves at those levels if we're not making the money, if our businesses are not scaling at the same rate that those 15 initial white companies that won those marijuana licenses are scaling.
You're absolutely right, Lisa. You're absolutely right. And because they had the wherewithal, the financial power, I was talking with someone earlier today, significantly, because if right was right, the millions of kids that we locked up for selling nickel bags, when they started doing marijuana deals, they would have set up some stores in Sandtown and in Southeast DC that these black kids could run, that they locked up, and all of a sudden it becomes legal, and we can't even get a license because we don't have the sustainability and the viability of the money to pay off to be in a position to get those licenses. It's
And
complex.
we're still getting locked up because locking up Cheryl Glenn, whether we agree or disagree, you can have a whole argument about the choices that she made. At the end of the day, what we're still looking at is another black person going to jail for marijuana under any.
Unbelievable. You know what she did wrong, Lisa? She didn't go on the front page and tell them, you need to give me $1 million, put it in right. You pay me $1 million and I'm going to vote for it. Say it publicly and then take the $1 million and do something. You don't got to hide and go for 16,000. You're going to go for $1 million or two and say you're going to give some back to little black kids and let them build their own store in the neighborhoods. See, we go for the pennies when we need to go for the jugular and the kill.
I agree, because at no point should we have allowed for it to be on a referendum without knowing what the constitutional laws are
Absolutely.
to protect and support our rights that would secure us being at the table. Yet we continuously allow our elected officials that we trust to do the right thing to say, well, this is going to be for our education fund. This is going to support an inclusionary goal of 29%. And then after the bill is passed and presented before the public, it comes back as unconstitutional. That's some BS. And literally, because you're legislators, we are in a position to change that. We do not have to accept that this is a law when we are lawmakers, when they're lawmakers. So I'm trusting that the brilliancy of Westmore and the new elected officials, especially the Attorney General, Anthony Brown, will bring forth policy legislations that are enforceable, that can help change this dynamic.
Yep. But what I'm saying is just like James Clyburn's brother was the chief motor of running Marion's for minority contractors. And I remember he told me at a meeting one day, he said, much of what Marion did in pushing black businesses, it wasn't a law. He had pushed them and persuaded developers and stuff to go with his program before they realized it was even a law. I'm saying is that West, we have to make sure that he has some black folks who are on the local level who and I have a saying, Miss Gaines, user-friendly Negroes, and that means that Negroes who are scared to offend white folks. If we get more black folks, it's saying we're going to push this no matter what's happening. And what I'm saying is because the money will come, because I'm from the labor movement. I work for ASME, which is basically public employees. And we got to say, we don't want politicians to love us. We want them to respect us. And what I'm saying is, when once West get elected, and Joe and us, we talked about this yesterday, we have to go to West and say, this West, we need you to do this. We just can't assume that he's going to do this. We have to bring him, because if you assume people, they say, well, they never came to me with this. You know what I mean? And so we have to basically, go where we have to make sure that it's a new day in the state of Maryland. That's all I'm saying.
I got a question for Joe Gaskins, if it's okay, because I know Mr. Gaskins is deep into politics, and I'm listening to Mr. O'Neill, and I know that we talked about the Board of Public Works, that before anything gets spent, they got to sign off on it, and that's going to show the tenacity of our power if we have it with a Derek Davis and a Westmore. Those are 2 votes right there, right? But Mr. Gaskins, my question to you is, who really is Brooke Learman when you talk about family dynamics?
Well, Brooke's going to have to prove who she is.
That, right?
But Brooke's father, Terry Learman, her father was a former chief of staff for Steny Hoyer. And he's a political insider. He's been a political insider all of his life.
Is he one of the most powerful men in this state?
Yes, absolutely. No. Yes, he is. He is one of the most powerful men in the state of Maryland. He
influence.
Yeah, and that's the reason why Brooke is there.
Yes.
In that position is not because of Brooke being there. If Brooke was running a race as a different white female, she would not have won if Terry. That's my opinion. She would not have won if Terry was not her father. But I guess we use whatever we have to use. But the bottom line is she's there. We have to hold her accountable too as well. But I would say this: you have, as you said, we have two African Americans there. Well, I'm counting all of them getting there. With the 2 of them, the treasurer and the governor, if we only got those 2 votes on the Board of Public Works, we would control billions of dollars in the state, because at any board meeting, a 2 vote could stop any contract from moving forward. And we've never had any governor, any lieutenant governor who act on behalf of the governor, any treasurer, nor any comptroller to stop a contract because it didn't include black folk in the contract.
Interesting.
So
that's real. We've never had a situation where we've never had a white person or white man on that board. And so my only point is that, does Brooke become the central point of power for the power, and they begin to use and leverage her, in a manner? Because at the end of the day, Joe, maybe you agree, maybe you don't agree, maybe Bruce, you agree, or Earl, you don't agree, that, white people feel as though, regardless of who's in office, the real deal when it comes down to real estate and resources and money, that they hold all the cards, be it in Maryland or any other place, and they're going to figure out a way to deal with that. And what does it look like? What's the strategy that Wes and Derek have to employ in order to ensure that there's a modulum of fairness? And what is fairness? What does fairness look like? More than what we've been getting? Or 50-50 split now that we got them, or we get 25% instead of 22% that we've had the past couple of years? What does it look like?
We can look at Brooke, but we also got to look at Derek. You just assumed that Derek,
boy, you took the words out of my mouth.
I couldn't wait to say,
with all due respect, Mr. Haynes. With all due respect, Mr. Haynes. With all due respect, because I don't like to get into names or whatever.
Yeah, I'll get
But
it a name.
let's call a spade a spade. Okay. If you look at Mr. Davis's track record,
Right.
he has not been an effective advocate for minority business.
There you go. Right.
Okay. He has not been an effective person for the rights of African Americans.
Right.
However, he looks the part. Let me give you a real quick synopsis of what I mean. There's a law in Prince George's County, CB 13, which makes it a crime to dance anywhere without a license. Okay, so if I have a restaurant and people start to dance, I'm in violation of the law and I can be arrested. It was really designed to stop go-go bands.
Mm.
But the fact of the matter, and because they wanted all the people to be pushed down to the National Harbor or close by, all the African American restaurants that were in close proximity suddenly disappeared. Okay, so now everybody has to go to the harbor, where 40% of the alcohol sales allegedly was controlled by your former state senator for many years, a man named Mike Miller.
In the county.
Yes. So what we have is a lot of people, and he mentioned Mr. Franklin, a great alpha man. I'm a member of Alpha fraternity, but he's not Martin Luther King. Let me tell you that. Okay. All right. So the issue becomes, even though they look like us, they grew up in our communities, they don't work for us. So that's why Mr. O'Neill so eloquently always calls them user-friendly Negroes. So what we have to do is,
Bruce, let me add this to it.
Go ahead.
When we got rid of our school board, I mean, our CEO of our school, Mr. Maxwell, his wife was his chief assistant. She was making more than the governor. She was making this. I'm not making this up.
But you know, at the end of the day, I won't bash our own people because we have enough folks that do that for us ourselves. I think we have the opportunity to work within ourselves to strengthen us. But when we look at now, you know, Brooks Lieberens is a civil rights attorney. So my hope is that she would take what she should be passionate about to the comptroller's office to make it equitable for us to be at the table as Black people and women. As a women-owned business, you know, that was my hope, that Derek and Brooke, along with Wes, would be able to level that playing field for us this coming term.
Yeah, and I hope to go to heaven, but don't mean I'm gonna get there.
Dig it.
That's real. And I know Derek Davis, and Derek Davis was a fierce opponent on alcohol beverage reform in the state. You know, he gave the current controller, Peter Francho, a hard time in terms of them trying to change some of the alcoholic beverage laws. And, you know, he also would have been backed by the Republican Party in becoming speaker if necessary. So we know that there's some opportunity with that brother. But let's hope that the pressure of what our asks are as a people, you know, as a collaboration, we have to figure out what collaboration looks like in Prince George's County, that has the second worst performing school in the state, and Baltimore City, that has the worst performing school in the state. Dorchester County has the third worst performing school in the state. What's in common? You know, so is that part of our ask as a collaborative group of Black people, where we finally come together, man? And as I mentioned earlier, compartmentalize what is our ask for their responsibility, and what is it that we have to do, that we have to be accountable for, which is our neighborhoods and our young people, man, you know?
But you failed to mention the role of developers and the influence, developers and the undue influence that they have, at least in Prince George's County, that they have on politics in Prince George's County. And it's gotten so egregious that right now there's a bill.
Planning. Go back to your county planning board, just like I tell the folks in Baltimore. Those trains left the station 15, 20 years ago. When are we going to understand that legislation relative to redistricting and what happened in DC, where Mr. O'Neill says he's from, and the gentrification, the plans to change communities didn't happen in 2012 and 2013. They happened at the turn of the century when they began to make plans on the infrastructure based on how long these housing structures would last. And they'd be offering blacks this much money, send them over to southern Prince George's County, and turning DC into the upside down look that it is now. Same thing they're trying to do in Baltimore, bringing in bike lanes. See, first they begin to build amenities that they know that the future constituency wants. And we don't see that.
Mike, all we trying to tell you, in Baltimore, that may be true, but in Prince George's County, these Negroes are so bourgeois. I'm talking about, and I'm not saying this to be funny. I live in Fort Washington, and I tell George this.
I used to live in Brandywine. I know Prince George's County.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you.
These Negroes, I mean, I can walk down the street tomorrow morning. I see 4 or 5 four-door Porsches, 3 or 4, 2 or 3 Maseratis. These niggas is happy. I didn't say it, but they are. But I'm saying they are happy out here. They don't even, we have a turnout of voting at 30%. That's worse than Southeast Washington. These niggas is happy. The main thing is this. What church you go to? Ebenezer, First Baptist of Glen Arden? They don't care. Only reason they like the county exec, because she can dress. Ooh, she got plaits and stuff. I'm not saying this to be funny. These Negroes is that we the richest county.
Not no more.
NAACP, we got on meeting got 500 members of the NAACP. What I'm trying to tell you, we have to make these people black again. You know what I mean?
I mean, who puts these people in office? I mean, you guys got Tony Music.
The president, the former Senate president. That was my point that I was making. The developers put them in office.
Right.
You know, they put out
place, but we know that it's not just in Prince George's County and Baltimore that we get less than 30% voter turnout. You know, what's our strategy around 30%? You know, I'm listening to Mr. Gaskins a few months ago. He understands that, you know, you have to work with what you got. You know, but if we're not investing in our politicians.
I'm trying to tell you, Mike, let me run this past you, Mike. Let me tell you about this race just went past. Peter Francho wanted his running mate was my council person.
You mean Jay Walker's wife?
Yeah, she's my council person. She got elected 2 years ago. We can't even. I told him, Peter. I said, Peter, I can't get this woman to answer the phone to pick up trash. Her kids went to private school. She hired half her family members and her staff. I say, how you gonna tell me she's competent to be a lieutenant governor? He looked at me like I'm a zip damn fool. You know what I mean? What I'm saying is, and I'm not saying this, people, and Joe keeping quiet, but he, you know, I'm Joe's. Say he let me go off. But what I'm saying is, the deal is, I'm saying I know these Negroes out here.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And the deal is, we can talk about Brooke. Brooke will be better for us, and I hate to say this, than Derek Davidson now. You know what I mean? And what I'm saying is, even when you're talking about Anthony Brown, the only reason Anthony Brown ran for Attorney General, he don't like to be with people. He didn't like to campaign every 2 years. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny with y'all. I'm giving you the straight up stuff. You know what I mean? He ain't gonna do nothing. This Negro, when he lost as governor, he didn't even want to go to the black churches over here. I live in Fort Washington. I ain't never seen him over here.
And they said the same thing about him in Baltimore. That's why he lost, because he didn't feel as though he needed to come to Baltimore.
What's the place y'all got? What's that place? The big church over there, Mount Carmel or whatever it is.
You're talking about there's a lot of big churches over here.
I'm talking about where Cummings had his funeral at.
New Psalmist?
New Psalmist. That Negro didn't even go in there. Everybody go there.
Yeah, we know that about Anthony Brown.
All I'm saying is, Don't get on Brooks Learman. We gonna get her straight.
No, we're not getting on it. We're just evaluating the power. You know, we can't get anywhere if we don't understand the power. You know,
Exactly.
and these people don't get in office. Even the how did you describe these Negroes? What'd you call them?
User
User
friendly. User
Let
friendly.
me tell you. Let me show you this, Mike. You know why Perez was second in place, came in second? Well, he was close to the machines politician than Peter was. You got to remember, Peter said
Ask me. He was closer to ask me.
no. He was closer to O'Malley's. O'Malley's.
Oh, O'Malley, y'all owned O'Malley. You talked about ask me and
No, I didn't
these
say
labor
ask me.
movements.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say ask me. I didn't say I'm in the labor movement. Just because I'm in the labor
Oh, I
movement.
thought you mentioned ask me. Didn't you mention ask me?
Mike. You're not listening, Mike. What I'm trying to
No,
tell
I'm listening to you very closely, which is why I can
let
ask
me
you a
finish, Mike. Let
question.
me finish though. I said
I did let you finish. I let you finish 2 points. I didn't interject.
I'm talking about the O'Malley Miller machine. The closest thing, they didn't like Peter, they didn't like West. The closest way was Tom Perez because he was labor secretary under O'Malley. So he was the closest thing to the machine. You know what I mean? Hoyer, he endorsed West, but what I'm saying is they didn't have nobody to go to. They didn't have that was the closest person. And Perez came in second. It surprised a lot of people. They thought Peter was going to win the whole thing. You know what I mean? But he came in third. He came in third. And all I'm telling you is that it's a new sheriff in town. You know what I mean?
Who's that?
It's Westmore. In
Oh,
Westmore,
in that regard, I thought you meant
Westmore. Let me finish. Westmore, just like all you Negroes who love that Obama.
Did you just classify me?
No, I'm just finish, Mike.
No. I'm listening to you very carefully. No. I'm listening.
No, I'm just saying. Let me finish. I'm gonna let you talk. I'm just saying. After he do his 8 years,
You keep saying you just like a typical DC guy. You a typical DC guy. Y'all know everything and don't let anybody else talk. You know,
Mr. Branch, what do you have to say?
No, go ahead.
I am enjoying this. I'm somewhere in. I really truly enjoying it. But I go back to what I say, and I agree to a degree. West, for me, my expectations are not as high as everyone else's that he's going to be a safe. I saw it, but I am proud as an older Black man to have seen possibly the first African-American president. And I was on the front row for Obama's inauguration. And I'll be prayerfully, I'll be somewhere close. Everybody's already given the election to West. He still got to run.
Yeah, that's true. I'm with you on that.
And people got to go behind that booth and vote and see. There's a level of complacency that everybody thinks West is automatically going to win. Okay, but there's some white folks. I looked at the voting. There's some white folks that closet will go in that booth and pull another name. And so when if we don't turn out, West won't be the governor, but he has that it factor. I think his heart is in the right place. Okay,
and let's do that with Ben Jealous as well as Anthony Brown. That by the time we get to the general election, it's a different story. So we do have to change the narrative, show up to vote, but also be prepared with a legislative agenda that represents African Americans to push that would encourage our grassroots base, to get out to vote.
And that's where I am right now. I don't want to count the chickens before they come out the hatch. I think Mr. Haney strikes a very good balance of pragmatic solutions with sometimes and Earl can be very aggressive, sometimes with us revolutionaries, as I would say. But Earl made a great point. He talked about Marion Barry. and he talks about Fort Washington, and he talks about Woodmore. But people don't realize, had it not been for Marion providing government opportunities and
We know
contracts,
Woodmore.
they should have named it after Barry.
Yep,
And
there wouldn't be a Woodmore.
I can recall when BET, let me give you a perfect example. He made sure that BET got the cable contract. And BET was in a small room like the one I'm in right now. But when Marion hit hard times, and this is the problem I have with our African American community and politics, because we don't create millionaires, we don't create wealth. Marion should have been on somebody's board. He should have died a rich man, but he never did. And our politicians come out, have to beg and borrow for a job. Wayne Curry in Prince George's County, right?
Jack
right
Young,
here.
Jack Young in Baltimore. I get you, man.
Yeah. Okay. They can't, Larry Young, they have to come back out and work. Thank God for Billy Murphy when Wayne gave him a job. So we don't take care of our own. How can we expect somebody else to take care of them if we don't take care of ourselves? And so what we have to do is begin to hire, not necessarily Black people, but people who have the heart of the community in their souls. And we've seen so many politicians. Right now, your attorney general is under fire. I mean, not attorney general, state's attorney. Well, former state's attorney now. She's under fire, all because she stood up. But if the community had come out and she's being indicted by another Black man who was a legislator, nobody's even talking about that. So we have to become more vigilant. We've stood out there, and while the NAACP president at the time stood in the car. Later on, he told people he led the march. We was up, he was afraid to get out the car. And Lisa was there, Earl was there, Joe was there, but he was afraid to get out of the car. And they had hooked it up. The Senate president hooked it up, said, "Who wants to be the first one to be arrested?" And he came and looked at me. I said, No, we ain't out here to be arrested. We make a statement. And these same people allowed the Taney statue to stay up there. We were the ones who helped bring it down. MGM, people say, "Man, we so happy that y'all doing that," when we sued them, but nobody wanted their names to be used. Nobody wanted to stand up. So as a result, the people like us, Joe can tell this story better than I. There was two females owned company. Can't remember what they did. They were listed on a contract, Mr. Haney, and they came to us for help, and they lost their house. One of them has died now, and we went up to see some of the people that you're talking about at the county council, and they all sat there and they listened and said, "Man, this is outrageous, and we're gonna do something about it." And as we were leaving the meeting, they pulled them in the side door. I'm not exaggerating. Joe can tell you. And they said, "Get rid of them. They're troublemakers." And they never got their contract. And they lost everything that they had. And the saddest part is those people had grew up with the legislator, and them, that told them to do that. She's in the legislature now. And so these are the kinds of things that we have to deal with when it comes to our elected officials. And that's my spiel for today.
Okay, so I have a question, because we're going to wind up going over, but I have a question. What can constituents in the different jurisdictions do to help businesses, Black businesses, and what can Black businesses do to help grassroots organizations help educate our constituents how to vote? Because I think sometimes I don't think they know how. Some of them are automatically thinking that somebody else is going to do it for them and they don't understand that it's not just the primaries, it's not just the general election, it's that midterm election that also plays a part. So what can we do collaboratively to work together to make that happen? Because like you said, our anticipation is that Westmore will be our next governor. But if people don't go out to vote, somebody else can go in that position. So
I would suggest that we continue to push for inclusionary practices on procurements, because if we can make money, then we can advocate, we can get airtime on social media, TV, etc., because we don't have a broader voice to communicate that.
okay.
The average person, we'll reach a certain demographics, but the average person that when you're looking at from a political aspect, they're not engaged. And because they're not engaged, they're busy working, trying to meet everyday expenses, living costs, etc. So if we can increase and grow our businesses, our Black businesses, and scale, then we'll be able to communicate, put more manpower in the streets and in the media, that we'll be able to touch a greater audience that would raise the awareness of what's going on and how to become more active and more engaged, especially when we're looking at issues concerning developers, that increase of rental rates that's pushing individuals into homelessness. And I mean, this is across the board, across the state. So we need to drill down to what are the tangible things that we can do immediately to help eradicate this issue.
Okay, Mr. Gaskins.
Lisa, just to piggyback real quick, a lot of people don't even know who Westmore is, and I know that sounds crazy, but there are a lot of people in the African American community don't even know who he is. Now, today, on my street, that are neighbors, never heard of him, and I think that's a sad indictment of where we are as a people.
But why do you think that is? I mean, literally, I ran a statewide election for governor. And when I look at, I didn't know who Westmore was, and I am engaged. And I had to learn and research and get additional information primarily on my own. You know, I want to know what are the barriers. He's a media person. He has a background, wrote books and some more, yet it did not trickle down into the community that made him more visible. Now, he won by a large margin, so there's a lot of people that do know him, Bruce, that and his marketing campaign has resonated. However, you know, that is an issue, and an issue that I think we need to discuss a little bit further on how do we drill down to help educate and motivate everyday people to let them understand that this is equally as important to them as it is to us as activists and business owners.
Okay.
I ask people in Baltimore, okay,
Let Mr.
and in this
talk,
community.
Bruce, you talk too much.
I just want to say who your councilperson is.
Did Earl say somebody talk too much?
Yeah, I shut up. Let Joe talk.
No, what I was saying is that there's two things on this approach. It's the campaign's way of doing business. I'm constantly in contact with Westmore's campaign at least 2 or 3 or 4 times a day. And the dynamic with the campaign is that you've got a young campaign, and it's now merging with with the state, and they were never a part of each other until 30 less than 45 days ago, and they got to come together and make all this happen by November. That's the challenge. I talked to the campaign manager today, and I said, well, look, you know, during the election, November, you are not going to have the senators or the delegates nor the council members campaigning because they've won the election. They're not going to put anybody at the polls. So what's your plan of action at that particular point? How do you engage them? So if we go silent on this, what you're saying is absolutely true. It's how we've had two Republican governors to manage to win in the state of Maryland. If we go to sleep on this and we don't wake up the population to be there in November, what we are talking about is something that could be a moot point. We might not even have an African American governor, because believe me, behind the scenes, white individuals who don't want West End are working to make sure that they reach their voter base and their voter base vote for the other candidate, Cox, Dan Cox. Dan Cox is not an enemy to them at all. Remember that. He might be an enemy to the African American community. He's not an enemy to them. They might not agree with a Dan Cox philosophy, but he is a white male. So we can't be too careless and too laid back to think that we can win that we've got this one. The second thing is that's to Michael. Effectively, over the last since the early '80s, I've always created a dynamic relationship with Baltimore City, and have enjoyed it. From Arnold Jolivet to Robert Clay, Tiger Davis, all those individuals who I could call my friends. And we could go and we looked at how to do things that would involve both major population areas. At that time, Prince George's County and Baltimore City.
Yeah.
And we worked effectively. We were always in Annapolis.
Okay. Yeah.
And we were always advocating for minority businesses. We have to go back to that particular model that we were doing before. We cannot put that on the sideline and just let the state run itself, because from a gubernatorial perspective, from a treasurer perspective, from a comptroller perspective, there are very powerful individuals in those elected officials' ears, and they have what we don't have as a Black community. We don't have money. Now, I think Earl mentioned that in the county, Prince George County, they now have a bill. Now that the council is a council that is not developer friendly, there's a law that they just put in place before the new candidates come on and assume their seats that will take the power away from those that will take the power away from those council members. They are making it a requirement that you have to have 8 votes to overturn any development decision.
Wow.
It's the reverse. Before, you had to have the votes to get a decision. Now they're saying you have to have 8 votes to vote against a developer's position here. So we're sleeping. They're working. And some of our major candidates who are running the county, individuals that were mentioned here, are working with the developers to make sure that that legislation passes. Now, what do they get out of it? They get to be the next county executive. They get to be the next state's attorney, because they will have the money that come from those major developers that will fund their races. But we have to change that dynamic, Michael. We have to change it in here, and we got to change it in Baltimore, because I was in Baltimore. We worked elections in Baltimore, I think, for maybe eight, maybe 12 or more years there, trying to get the right person to be in office. But we cannot attack our elected officials like they were being attacked with, I'm going to use this name, Wayne Frazier, who attacked our senator in Baltimore. And he attacked him viciously and talked about him that way. We have to help them to get to that next step. But unless we are an effective, Black, well-organized group with the ability, the knowledge to make it all happen, then we're going to die and we'll never get it done. So that's our challenge. Our challenge is to put that team together and put it together now and to start to work. Use our media sources to reach into our different communities. And that's why I'm thankful whenever I get a chance to go on your media markets, because we don't have the media markets in Prince George County that are grassroots media markets to reach out. We have to depend on Baltimore to carry that. But that's going to be critical. We're gonna have to use social media components in order to get the message out to the individuals, and it worked. We sunk
Absolutely.
Peter. We sunk Peter with Facebook
Absolutely.
else. Okay,
Absolutely.
so it can
Absolutely.
work.
It
Well,
can.
Mr. Gaskins, if I can say, Quandra, because I have a high degree of respect for Mr. Gaskins. I remember a few months ago, we alluded to a conversation of Prince George's in Baltimore. How could we collaborate? How could we work closer together? The two largest Black jurisdictions geographically in the state. If you look at from the Attorney General to the Controller, meaning the Treasurer, potentially the Governor, all are from Prince George's County, the president of the Senate. All are from either Prince George's County or Baltimore. And to your point, Mr. Gaskins, as I was working with the Westmore campaign today, I interviewed Westmore. I interviewed Dan Cox. You can look at those two interviews. We have to have a media platform that informs our Black people. And that's why blackusa.news and communication vehicles like this are so important. And when I see you on it, Mr. Gaskins, I realize that it's important for us to promote and to push this because it's credible, it's accessible, and it speaks to what our people need to hear. And to what Bruce said and Lisa said, the education of our people when it comes to politics and their ignorance of it, their ignorance of candidacies, their ignorance to what Mr. O'Neill says of having people in places that we really shouldn't have because they're backed by money. We have to do a better job of educating our people. And there's a medium such as this, blackusa.news. Maybe it was the Afro, maybe it's the Prince Georgian. We have got to circle the wagons with our media and with our people like you guys and me and Donnie and Quandra. And we got to talk. We got to communicate.
I agree, because I told you one of the main things when we're talking about developers, I want to circle back to this rental increase across the country. Charles County in particular has the highest increase at 39.9% in the state.
Wow.
Yes, 39.9% in the state. And when
Wow.
we drill down to why rents have tripled in Charles County by itself, when you have Montgomery County that has housing laws, rent rate laws, and what is that area? Tacoma Park, Prince George's and Charles County and the state itself have no rental control laws on the book. HUD has identified the fair market value for Charles County and has actually it insists that they activate what they're entitled to help reduce seniors' rental rates as well as the cost for Black and brown people to rent. Yet Charles County has not accepted it. Our legislators here has not accepted it. When we look at Baltimore and you're talking about your homeless rates, you had a homeless issue prior to COVID. Yet the pandemic pushed people that lived in inner cities in urban districts to move to suburban districts. And those people that moved to suburban districts sold their homes have now become renters. And becoming renters made the what you call it, the inventory for apartments low. So if it's lower inventory, then your rental rates are going to go up. Your rental rates are going
Demand, supply and demand.
Yes.
Supply and demand. That's exactly where I was getting to. And you know, if we have the opportunity, one, that we can put rent control laws in place. Other areas across the country have done it. Maryland needs to do it. It is an issue that this governor can get in front of if elected, and he can become the champion across the country for helping to not only tell investors and developers that this may be your market, but you will not gouge our communities, especially Black and brown communities, where they rely on our vote to get elected.
Wow.
Okay. Wow, this has been a really fruitful conversation. So, what is the next step? What is the next step, Miss Ellis?
I would say that we build our coalition. The Maryland Business Clergy is taking the lead to help communicate or gather additional information so that we can speak factually and knowledgeably about why the process, why this crisis is, and what can we do to help mediate it. People are moving into homelessness. You can't afford to live. Food rates have gone up. Maryland's as a whole have a 96.5% increase in rent across the state. And Baltimore, Charles County, and Prince George's are bearing the brunt of all of that. So our next step have to be to come together as a community, get our Black legislative agenda together. So as this new governor is elected and the new legislative body takes their oath in January, on day one, we're prepared with our legislative agenda to say this is what we expect, hold them accountable, and while at the same time, right now, we can begin to educate the community about, well, the community already feeling the brunt. We can pull them into the fold, sign petitions, and move forward with helping with this demand to lower and control rental rates and ownership. People can't move into home ownership if they're now paying 3 times the rate on what they're renting. The hope of being a first-time home buyer, that dream dies, and it dies for Black and brown people in the state of Maryland.
Okay, Mr. O'Neill.
Yes, ma'am.
What can we do? What's our next steps?
I think Joe or somebody said it that maybe people think I talk a lot, but I'm also out there. I make sure that I get out there and help my candidates. I have a senator. We have a senator, Senator Muse, and we got him elected. And I'm going to do the footwork, but we have to do some nonpartisan, making sure people understand that they have to vote. You know what I mean? We have to tell them that they're going to lose something if they don't vote, to make sure it's a big turnout and stuff. And that's what it means. It just can't be just the Westmore campaign. It has to be nonpartisan groups that basically say you need to vote, so we won't be like Georgia. We won't be like Mississippi. We have to encourage people to vote. I mean, and I'm not bragging. It's just like I was the only, like I told you, I live right where Francho's lieutenant governor lived. On my street, Fort Washington Road, I had the only Westmore signs on there. Everybody had Francho signs. I'm saying as late as after the election, they still had Francho signs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And people, I mean, just those little things of putting signs in their yards and encouraging people to vote, just to vote for that. And we have to tell people just about Cox that he basically supplied buses to go to January 6th. Just like we told people about Francho. Francho said he didn't support Ben Jealous because he had a good working relationship with Hogan. We have to tell people. People say, oh, you know what I mean? We have to get out there and get, do the work. And the 4 people you see here, the 4 people, all of us, Joe, Bruce, Lisa, we not only just talk the talk, we walk the walk. Joe, along with Larry Gibson. Well, Larry was putting up signs in Baltimore all over, in Baltimore County and all that, Anne Arundel. Joe was doing that in St. Mary's, Charles, and Prince George's County. I'm talking about them big signs. I mean, I saw on Facebook where Larry Gibson was doing that. And we have to put our money where our mouth is. So people, these old ass people doing it, why can't we do it? You know what I mean? I mean, that's the deal. You know what I mean? And that's what we do. When people see us 4, yeah, Earl talks all that stuff. But when you call Earl on the phone, he gonna be there. You know what I mean? That's what you have to get more commitment from. You know what I mean? That's all I got to say.
All right, Mr. Brand.
Yeah, Mike. I'm from DC. I'm from Southeast, and I do. And matter of fact, at 8 o'clock each night.
I knew he was coming back.
Period, I read a book. And y'all interrupting
I
with
knew he
that.
was coming back.
You know, that's right. Yeah, I'm from DC.
I
We
coming
do
back.
know more. And what we don't know ain't worth knowing. Now,
I'm gonna have a cup of coffee with you. I'm gonna buy lunch, man. We got some notes. I knew he was coming back. I said when I knew he's coming
let
back.
him come back. That's right. And man,
Mr.
guess what,
Hayes?
Mike? Guess right. I got Baltimore in me. My wife from Baltimore. My wife from Baltimore. I know about Baltimore. You ain't.
Mr. Haney, I'm a Washingtonian as well.
Bruce is too.
Bruce
Joe,
is not a Washingtonian. He need to stop claiming DC.
he said that. He said,
No, I'm going to DC General.
everything.
Just for the record, I was going to DC General Hospital. Grew up in Southeast.
Who was
Okay.
that? Who was
Grew up in Southeast.
I was born in Garfield Hospital.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Bruce.
But I'm not gonna say much because there's a scripture that says there's one thing to be thought a fool, but another thing to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And
Ain't that
but at the end of the day, what we have to do is come together.
right?
I think shows like this and conversations like this are healthy, but at the end of the day, we must hold our politicians accountable.
Right.
And there's no way that if there had been the first Jewish president or the first Jewish, let me say it this way, the first Jewish candidate that had a chance to become the first Jewish guy to be governor of the state of Maryland, would the Jewish Union support a black person or a white person? The chairman of our Maryland Black Caucus, who was a good friend of mine, and he knows how I feel this way, supported Peter Franchot, not based on qualification, but based on the fact of what he would get out of the deal.
Who's that?
I
Daryl
think
Barnes?
those. Huh?
Who is that? Daryl Barnes?
What did you?
Yeah.
I didn't want to say his name.
I didn't know. My apologies.
He's a good friend. Yeah.
But he's out there now. So
And I think those are kinds of decisions we have to watch when our candidates make those kinds of decisions, because he wasn't the only one. There was a long list of people on the Franchot ticket. Okay. And people did it for personal interest. And I don't do things for personal interest. I do things for community interest. And that's what I think we have to begin to, as Lisa said, help our people understand how important that is, because legacy is important.
all right, Mike.
I'm done.
What's next?
First of all, I appreciate being on here with these good people from Charles County, all from DC. I lived in DC. 3 of my kids were born in GW. 2 were born in Georgetown. I lived in Brandywine. I've lived in Baltimore, Hartford, Connecticut, Charlotte. My business took me all over, and so that's why I enjoy conversations such as this. But what does a lobbying coalition look like between Black people with common interests? What does the coalition look like that takes us to Annapolis to the point of holding our elected officials accountable, where we're all on the same page? What does a simplistic ask look like? That we talk about education, we talk about fair housing, we talk about economic development opportunity, where you 4, as Earl, as you said, you 4, and I started counting 1, 2, I guess I'm not included in that. But I'm gonna say, but it's okay. It's all good. It's all good, right? So where does that coalition come in play, where we're all on the same page as a people, and we go and hold our people accountable in Annapolis for marijuana legislation, fair housing, economic development, et cetera, between Baltimore and DC, with the top 6 in this state in power from either of those 2 jurisdictions? How can we 5 or 6 get together and be the foundation for making something like that happen?
That's what we need.
All
And
right.
I invite you guys to go to 60 Minutes in Black America. Not only did I interview Wes Moore for an hour and a half, great interview with him back in June, I also interviewed Dan Cox. Guess what was the most popular view on 60 Minutes in Black America? It was a Dan Cox interview of an hour and 17 minutes. I was astounded at how many people went and watched him. And we need to look at, I'm not going to say our enemy, we need to look at our opposition and understand what their strategy and what they're saying. But I invite you to go look at it and listen to what he's saying and why a Pastor Wright, who's African American, or Kim Klasick, who's African American, because someone said everyone that looks like us may not necessarily be on our agenda, why they came out in support of him, why he was in Sandtown, a very heavily populated Black jurisdiction in Baltimore, speaking with the people. You know, and to your point, that undecided adds up. Does that knock Wes out? Let's pray it doesn't. Let's pray that we all come together, be it Darryl Barnes or whoever, get behind, educate our people, and encourage them to get out and vote, because Mr. Gaskins says something compelling. Now that Wes doesn't necessarily have the political relationships of those that have won their election to help him at the polling locations to ensure people vote for him, how are we going to help them offset that? That's a compelling question. Very compelling. Thanks, Quandra, so much for having me on this.
You're welcome, Mr. Gaskins.
Okay, I will say this, because all these individuals claim to be born in D.C. or.
I didn't.
Not you, Michael. But I'll tell you this, that my birthplace is Westmoreland County, so that you know what Westmoreland County represents to the state of Maryland. It was the first state to elect the first president. Well, it was the state where the first president of the United States was born. George Washington was born in Westmoreland County, about 15 miles from my home down there.
Virginia.
Yeah, and we have always had a vibrant African American population. There still do today, of individuals who were free blacks, Native American blacks, extreme mixture of very progressive people who have been in politics and who have been business people. But the way they successfully did and the way we did successfully, we worked together as a group of people. No matter what, we were a tight, bonded community. We have to recreate that bond, and we have to do it. The bond between Prince George's and Baltimore City and Charles.
Amen. Amen.
Well, okay, so all right, so what can be the next step if I was to join into this coalition with each one of you? I could be a venue for you to communicate.
We would love it, Quandra. We would love that. We already accept the invitation. We're not even gonna let you access. We've accepted.
So thank you so much for inviting me, but I would like the next step to be offline, a scheduled meeting that we can come back and drill down on this approach to the issues that we talked about today. So I'm very serious about how we move into January with a legislative agenda that we need to push as a coalition, united, and show up with numbers, and not, in the past, it just primarily had been Joe and I, or Joe, out the Maryland business clergy, just showing up at the local level, Annapolis, raising hell all by ourselves, and individuals looked at us as the angry Black people in the room. But we were angry Black people that presented suggestions and recommendations for change. We did not just show up arguing and making noise, but we showed up with a plan and a strategy that could possibly benefit us as a community and as residents and taxpayers in the state of Maryland. That's what I would look forward to our next step to be, to talk about, to work on, to come together, to put this together.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'd love to see just each of us bring maybe one or two people with a principle over personalities approach. You know what I'm saying? Because we all know significant people in our jurisdiction that we could bring that have significance, but everybody can't sit at the table As someone said earlier, everyone wants something different, but it's got to be principle over personalities and people that we trust understand that right is right, and for the right of everyone, we need to sit down. So I'd love to see us, each of us 5 that may make 10, bring someone to a table that we feel could be of help and value, and understand principle over people's conversation that we could have offline. I'd love to see that.
And Ms.
I
Gaines,
agree. We'll do it.
this is recorded so we can send it to some people.
Of course.
Okay, I'm just asking. I don't know.
So how do we get a copy?
That's what I'm saying.
I would like to see the 60 Minutes in Black America. How do you have a
I'll give you,
website?
you can actually go on blackusanews.com and you can pull all of our shows.
And Lisa, I'll get you. I think I have your email address. I think Quandra copied us all.
Yep.
And so I'll forward you the link. And on blackusa.news YouTube channel, you can pull up past interviews and get a share. But I'll make sure I send you Westmore and Dan Cox. And as I mentioned, we're talking with the Westmore people now about doing another one. Because one thing, as you mentioned, these are recorded, Mr. O'Neill. You're right. So they hold politicians account. Don't you remember when you said this on June 15th about education? And it's important for us to have that as documentation in our archive.
That's important because one of the success of unseating 2 judges in Prince George's in 2018, we successfully put 2 Black women for the first time ever, unseated 2 judges. I won't name them, but we do know. We do know the powerful lobbyists. However, yeah, I will, because I held the panel that's and I swing with a hammer. I don't mind saying that. But Bruce Bariano had the audacity to send out a letter to business owners and Black people in particular, saying if you want to do business in in Annapolis, that you need to vote for my son and push my son. I be damned. And literally airing and hosting and educating the public on just that, how they ran, what type of judges they were, how they ruled across the bench. Education is power. Yes, and we can take your recording and push your recordings and continue to push it and continue to talk about it, because my inbox was just filled.
I can imagine.
Just didn't know, but that was part of the success that we've had, and using the social media platform and platforms like this to unseat those 2 individuals that should have never been appointed as judges.
Amen.
Well, it has been a pleasure.
Great job, Quandra. Great job.
Show.
Yeah.
This is my second show for the Political Cipher. So, Mr. Gaskins, I will be getting with you and Mike and Miss Ellis and Mr. Branch and Mr. O'Neill. You remind me of my uncle. I'm telling you, you do.
The uncle at the barbecue.
Yes.
They don't want to no barbecue. They want to talk all that philosophical bull stuff. I'm telling you like real, baby.
With this man.
Stuff, y'all talking about something.
I can't wait to see this man.
We got to
I
deal
am
with.
definitely going to use
That's what I'm telling
the
you.
user-friendly Negroes. I am definitely going to
That's right.
I'm
User-friendly.
telling
Scared to offend white folks. That's what it is. I made that up. That's right. Joe told me to be on here, and Joe know when he tell me to something, he know I ain't got no cut cards or nothing.
I know you told me that too.
Right.
Before you came on the show.
Absolutely.
Mr. Haney, you'll get a kick out of this. One thing about Mr. O'Neill, we was at the polls working, and the county exec came down there and was standing with Francho. He chased her away from Francho and told him, "Get over there with Westmore."
County exec.
No, see, he got it.
Yes.
Then what I did,
That's the way.
state senator. I went to the state senator. My state senator I said, Obi, you got to tell her she's on the she's on the Peter Francho's tent. You got to tell her. He just sit there. She just sit there. I said, hey, come here. That's Peter Francho. This is our tent over here. You know what I mean? They put their pants on just like me.
I am not surprised. I can't wait to have a cup of coffee with him. I can't wait to have a cup of coffee with him. I can't wait.
You're going to need something stronger than coffee, brother.
He ain't that bad.
Well,
You know what
we
I mean?
got it.
That's
We
what-
really
that's-
appreciate
I gotta
it.
keep it real because see,
Thank you, Quandra. This has
You're
really
welcome.
been an
it's been
enjoyable
great,
evening.
Chandra. But
Thanks,
I got
Quandra.
some catfish to eat, baby.
Thanks.
I got some catfish.
Well, thank you
I'll talk
for
to y'all
joining
later
us
on.
for
You know what I mean? I'm getting ready to eat
Political
dinner. I'm
Cycle
already
with
in the pump.
Q. Enjoy your evening.
Okay.
Please check us out. We have many shows on Black USA News. Check us out and have a great evening.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much,
Chandra.
ma'am. I'm
All
glad
right.
to be on it. Glad you called me.